What if the most dangerous thing lurking in the Appalachian woods isn't a bear, a wolf, or even a desperate poacher, but something that can think, plan, and mimic your voice so perfectly that even your closest friend wouldn't know the difference? Imagine being trained for every threat the world can throw at you: ambushes, explosives, even the chaos of war, only to find yourself facing something that doesn't fit any manual, something that makes the hair on your neck stand up for reasons you can't explain. This isn't just another campfire story or a recycled urban legend. It's a true account, whispered among soldiers and forest rangers, buried in after-action reports, and passed around in late-night barracks when the lights are low and the wind howls outside. It's the kind of story that makes you question what's really out there in the dark, and whether some things are better left unspoken. The Appalachian Mountains have always been a place of secrets. For centuries, people have vanished without a trace in these endless forests. Locals talk about strange lights, unexplainable screams, and the feeling of being watched by something just out of sight. Some say it's superstition, just old mountain tales meant to scare kids into coming home before dark. But every so often, someone with no reason to lie, someone trained to face real danger, comes back with a story that chills even the most hardened skeptic. This is one of those stories. It begins on a night that was supposed to be routine. A dead shift, just 4 hours of cold, coffee, and silence at a lonely checkpoint deep in the West Virginia woods. The kind of assignment where nothing ever happens, where the biggest threat is falling asleep on your feet. But that night, the forest felt different. The air was heavy, the silence too complete, and the darkness pressed in from every side. It was the kind of night where you start to wonder if the stories are true, if there really is something out there that doesn't want to be seen. The soldiers assigned to that checkpoint weren't rookies. They'd seen combat, dealt with smugglers, and spent enough time in the wild to know the difference between a deer crashing through the brush and something that shouldn't be there. But nothing in their training prepared them for what they would face. It started with a sound, a deep, deliberate knock echoing through the trees, too heavy to be a branch, too purposeful to be an accident. Then came the smell, thick and metallic, like wet fur and blood, rolling in on the wind and settling in their throats. Radios that had worked perfectly all night suddenly filled with static, and the usual background chatter from command went dead. The forest, which had been alive with the usual chorus of crickets and owls, fell silent, as if every living thing was holding its breath. And then, just beyond the tree line, a shape appeared. Not a man, not an animal, but something massive, hunched and watching. It moved with a confidence that said it knew exactly where the soldiers were and exactly how to stay just out of sight. The moonlight caught on matted fur and impossibly broad shoulders, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. The soldiers gripped their rifles, every instinct screaming at them to run, to hide, to do anything but stand their ground. But they held, because that's what they were trained to do, even when every part of them wanted to believe this was just a nightmare. But the nightmare was only beginning. What happened over the next few nights would leave one man missing, others wounded, and all of them questioning everything they thought they knew about the world. The official reports would call it a wildlife encounter, a training accident, a case of nerves. But the men who were there know better. They know what they saw, what they heard, and what they felt. And they know that whatever is out there in those mountains, it's still watching, still waiting, and still learning. So before you dismiss this as just another scary story, ask yourself, what would you do if you heard a knock in the woods and the voice calling your name wasn't quite your own? Would you answer or would you run, knowing that some things in the dark are better left alone? Because in the Appalachian night, the line between legend and reality is thinner than you think. And sometimes the only thing standing between you and the unknown is the courage to hold your ground. Even when you're not sure what's out there is even human. The assignment. The assignment was supposed to be simple. Just another checkpoint, another night in the endless rotation of rural patrols that made up the backbone of the Army's presence in the Appalachian backcountry. The orders were clear. Monitor a narrow logging road deep in the West Virginia hills, keep an eye out for illegal crossings, and report anything unusual. On paper, it was the kind of job that barely rated a second thought. But anyone who spent time in those mountains knows that nothing is ever as simple as it seems. The checkpoint itself was little more than a makeshift outpost. Two battered Humvees parked nose to nose, a stack of timber for cover, and a half-collapsed shack left over from the last logging crew to pass through. The road was a scar through the forest, winding between ancient pines and steep ridges, the kind of place where cell service vanished and the only light came from the moon and the occasional flicker of a distant farmhouse. For most of the year, the only traffic was the odd pickup truck or a rusted-out ATV, maybe a poacher testing his luck, or a local hauling firewood. But lately there had been rumors, stories of cartel runners testing new routes, of smugglers moving product through the gaps in the hills, of strangers seen where no one should be. The Army took those rumors seriously. The region was a patchwork of private land, national forest, and forgotten trails, a perfect place for anyone who wanted to disappear. The unit assigned to the checkpoint rotated through in shifts, 4 hours at a time, always in pairs. The men and women who pulled those shifts were used to boredom, to the cold, to the endless dark. They joked about ghost stories and local legends, but everyone knew the real dangers were human, desperate men with nothing to lose, armed and unpredictable. But even before that night, there was something about this particular stretch of road that set people on edge. The locals called it the Gap, a narrow pass where the wind seemed to howl a little louder and the trees pressed in a little closer. Old-timers whispered about things seen in the woods, strange lights, shadows that moved against the wind, the echo of knocks that had no source. Some said the land itself was cursed, that the mountains remembered every secret ever buried in their soil. Most soldiers laughed it off, but every now and then someone would come back from a shift with eyes a little too wide, hands that shook just a bit when they poured their coffee. The team that night was a mix of veterans and newcomers. There was Corporal Diaz, a wiry Texan with a sharp sense of humor and nerves of steel, the kind of guy who could sleep through artillery but would wake up at the sound of a twig snapping. Waller the gunner was all muscle and quiet intensity, a man who trusted his thermal scope more than his own eyes. Doc Singh, the medic, kept to himself, always checking and rechecking his aid bag, as if he expected trouble to come at any moment. And then there was the narrator, a soldier who'd seen enough to know that sometimes the scariest things weren't the ones you could see. Their orders were simple: hold the road, report any movement, and above all, stay disciplined. The rules of engagement were drilled into them. No unauthorized discharge, positive identification before firing, and never ever break contact unless absolutely necessary. The lieutenant in charge, Roar, was new to the mountains but sharp, by the book, and determined to keep his team safe. Staff Sergeant Kane, the platoon sergeant, was a rock, calm, unflinching, and respected by everyone who served under him. But as the sun dipped below the ridgeline and the temperature dropped, the forest seemed to close in around the checkpoint. The wind carried the scent of snow and something else, something metallic, sharp, and unfamiliar. The radio checks came in on schedule, each one a lifeline to the outside world. But with every passing hour, the sense of isolation grew. The woods swallowed sound, turning every footstep into a thunderclap and every whisper into a secret. It wasn't just the soldiers who felt it. The locals avoided the area after dark, muttering about wood talk and warning the Army liaison, Price, not to answer any knocks they might hear. Price was a fixture in the region, a Forest Service veteran who'd seen more than his share of wildfires and lost hikers. He didn't scare easily, but even he seemed uneasy when he visited the checkpoint, his eyes scanning the tree line as he handed out coffee and advice. "If you hear knocking," he said, "don't knock back. Just let it be." The soldiers laughed it off, but the warning stuck with them. There was something about the way Price said it, like he was repeating a rule older than the uniform he wore. The county deputy, Hart, echoed the same advice when she stopped by with a map and a few words of caution. "If you smell wet dog and blood and can't find the source, don't chase it," she said, her voice flat and serious. "Just let it go." But orders were orders, and the Army didn't believe in ghosts. The team settled in for the night, checking their gear, logging every sound and movement, and trying to ignore the way the forest seemed to breathe around them. The first few hours passed in a routine haze: radio checks, thermal sweeps, the occasional coyote yipping in the distance. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Every soldier felt it, even if no one wanted to say it out loud. Because in the Appalachian night, routine can turn to nightmare in a heartbeat. And as the hours dragged on, the soldiers at the checkpoint would learn that some assignments are anything but simple. The woods were waiting, and something in the dark was about to make its presence known. The first encounter, the first sign that something was wrong, didn't come with a bang or a scream. It came with a knock. Not the polite tap of a visitor, but a deep, resonant thud that seemed to vibrate through the frozen ground and up into the soldier's boots. It was the kind of sound that made you stop breathing for a second, just to be sure you'd really heard it. The forest was thick with shadows, the moonlight barely enough to paint the snow in shades of blue and gray. Every tree looked like it was leaning in, listening. Corporal Diaz was the first to react. He froze, coffee halfway to his lips, eyes wide and searching the tree line. The knock came again, a little closer this time, echoing off the trunks like a warning. The air seemed to tighten, every sound amplified. The crunch of snow under boots, the soft hiss of breath through a scarf, the faint static from the radio. The usual background noise of the forest, crickets, owls, the distant rush of the creek had vanished, replaced by a silence so complete it felt unnatural. The smell hit next. It rolled in on the wind, thick and heavy, a mix of wet dog and copper that made the back of your throat burn. It was the kind of scent that didn't belong in the winter woods, sharp enough to make Diaz cover his mouth with his sleeve. "Something's out there, man," he whispered, voice barely more than a breath. The words hung in the air, unanswered. The soldiers' training told them to stay put, to keep their positions and wait for confirmation before reacting. But every instinct screamed that something was watching, something that didn't care about rules or protocols. The radio, their lifeline to the outside world, suddenly filled with static. No response from command, no background chatter, just dead air. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed the signal. Then through the trees, a shape began to emerge. At first, it was just a shadow, darker than the rest, moving with a slow, deliberate confidence. As it stepped into a patch of moonlight, the soldiers could see that it was massive, taller than any man, broad-shouldered, with arms that hung low and a head that tilted as if studying them. The outline was all wrong, too bulky, too fluid, covered in matted fur that caught the light in strange ways. It didn't move like a bear or a man. It moved like something that belonged to the forest, something that had always been there, just out of sight. Diaz's hand hovered over his rifle, safety off, finger trembling on the trigger. The narrator kept his own weapon leveled, fighting the urge to flick on his flashlight. If this was a test, if someone was trying to spook them, he wasn't about to give away their position. But the longer the figure stood there, the more it became clear. This wasn't a prank, and it wasn't a poacher in a ghillie suit. This was something else. The creature let out a sound, low and chest deep, not quite a growl, not quite a hum. It vibrated through the ground, through the soldier's bones, making knees buckle and hearts race. The air felt thick, every breath a struggle. The figure crouched low, knuckles dragging across the snow, eyes catching the moonlight like wet glass. The smell grew stronger, choking, almost physical in its intensity. Diaz whispered, "What the hell is that?" But no one had an answer. The radio crackled, and for a split second, a single word broke through the static. "Hold." The voice was distorted, almost mechanical, but unmistakably human. The figure froze, head snapping toward the sound as if it understood. Then, without a sound, it stepped back into the trees and vanished, swallowed by the darkness. For a long moment, the soldiers didn't move. Rifles up, eyes wide, hearts pounding, they stared into the blackness, waiting for something, anything to break the spell. Slowly, the forest came back to life. Crickets chirped, an owl hooted, the wind rustled through the branches. But nothing felt normal. The sense of being watched lingered, heavy and oppressive. Neither Diaz nor the narrator spoke for the rest of the shift. There was nothing to say. They both knew what they'd seen, and they both knew it wasn't over. The smell clung to their jackets, a reminder that whatever had come to the edge of the clearing was still out there, somewhere in the dark. When dawn finally broke, the world looked the same as it always had. Snow on the ground, trees standing silent, the road winding off into the hills. But everything felt different. The soldiers moved with a new wariness, eyes scanning the shadows, ears tuned to every sound. The routine of the checkpoint, radio checks, gear inspections, log entries felt hollow, like a ritual performed to keep the fear at bay. At first light, they were called back to the TOC. The frost still clung to the Humvee, and the smell lingered in the air, impossible to shake. Staff Sergeant Kane listened to their report without interruption, his face unreadable. Lieutenant Rohr, the new officer, watched them closely, as if trying to measure the truth in their eyes. The comms guy, Roas, checked the logs. No scheduled traffic, no relays, nothing that could explain the voice on the radio. The soldiers were ordered to double-check their equipment, to stay alert, to log every detail. But the unspoken message was clear. Whatever was out there, it wasn't finished with them. The forest had shown them a glimpse of something ancient, something that didn't might care about human rules or boundaries. And as the sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of frost, the soldiers knew that the real test was still to come. Because in the Appalachian woods, the first encounter is never the last. And once you've seen what waits in the shadows, you can never go back to believing the world is a safe, predictable place. The forest remembers, and it never lets go. The unexplainable events. After that first encounter, the checkpoint was never the same. The soldiers tried to slip back into routine. Radio checks, gear inspections, the endless cycle of logging every sound and movement. But the sense of normalcy was gone. Every shadow seemed to stretch a little longer. Every gust of wind carried the memory of that thick, metallic stench. The forest, once just a backdrop to their mission, now felt alive and watchful, as if it was waiting for them to let their guard down. The next night, the team returned to their post with a new edge to their nerves. Orders were tighter. No white light unless absolutely necessary, thermals mounted, body cams rolling, and comms checks every 15 minutes. Staff Sergeant Kane's voice was steady, but even he couldn't hide the tension in his eyes. The soldiers moved with a quiet discipline, each man and woman acutely aware that something had changed. The logbook, once filled with routine entries about wind direction and passing vehicles, now recorded every oddity, strange smells, missing equipment, and sounds that defied explanation. It started small. A chem light, set out as a range marker, vanished without a trace. The snow beneath it was untouched. No footprints, no drag marks, just empty space where the light had been. Waller, the gunner, swore he'd placed it himself. And the others believed him. No one joked about it. The forest had a way of swallowing things, but this felt deliberate, like a message left just for them. Then came the sounds. Not the usual creaks and groans of settling trees, but patterns. 3 sharp clicks, a pause, then 2 more echoing from the far side of the tree line. The soldiers listened, hearts pounding, as the clicks repeated, always just out of sight. Waller swept the area with his thermal scope, but the screen showed nothing but cold, dead trees. "Negative," he whispered, voice tight. No heat, no movement. But everyone could feel it, the sense of being watched, of something circling just beyond the reach of their lights. The radio, their last link to the outside world, began to act up. Static hissed and popped, drowning out the usual background chatter. Sometimes, in the middle of a comms check, the line would go dead for a heartbeat, then snap back with a burst of white noise. Once, the narrator thought he heard a voice in the static, a single word, distorted and low but unmistakable. "Hold." He logged it, hands shaking, but said nothing to the others. Some things were better left unspoken. The forest itself seemed to change. The usual animal sounds faded, replaced by a heavy, unnatural silence. The wind died and the cold pressed in from every side. The soldiers rotated shifts, trying to keep their minds occupied, but the tension only grew. Every hour brought a new anomaly. A branch snapped deep in the woods. A shadow flickered at the edge of the clearing. The smell of wet dog and blood drifted in and out like a warning. Local superstition began to feel less like a joke and more like a set of rules for survival. Price, The Forest Service liaison stopped by with coffee and a warning. If you hear knocking, don't answer. Don't knock back. Just let it be. The soldiers nodded, but the advice lingered in the air, heavy and unresolved. Even Deputy Hart, the county officer, seemed uneasy. If you smell something you can't explain, don't chase it, she said, her eyes never leaving the tree line. Some things out here don't want to be found. The soldiers tried to hold on to their training, to trust in their equipment and each other. But the forest had a way of getting inside your head. Doc Singh, usually calm and collected, started muttering prayers under his breath. Waller cleaned his thermal scope twice an hour, as if he could scrub away the fear. Diaz, once the joker of the group, grew quiet, eyes darting to every shadow. Then, just past midnight, the silence broke. A scream echoed through the trees, not human, not animal, but something in between. It was high and deep at the same time, layered like two voices screaming together. The sound rattled in their chests, freezing them in place. Doc Singh clutched his aid bag, knuckles white. Diaz gripped his rifle so tightly his hands shook. The narrator sent a sitrep to Kane, voice barely steady. Audio contact. Unknown source. Coordinates logged. The scream faded, but the sense of dread remained, heavier than ever. The logbook filled with shaky handwriting, entries about missing lights, strange clicks, and the feeling of being surrounded. The soldiers rotated shifts, pretending everything was normal, but no one believed it anymore. The forest had shown its hand, and the soldiers knew they were being watched, tested, measured. As the hours dragged on, the sense of unease grew. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of blood and fur. The radio crackled with static, and every shadow seemed to move. The soldiers clung to their routines, but the forest pressed in, relentless and unyielding. By the end of the night, one thing was clear. Whatever was out there wasn't just passing through. It was watching, waiting, and learning. The soldiers had become part of a game they didn't understand, and the rules were written in the dark. And as the first light of dawn crept over the ridge, the soldiers knew that the unexplainable events were only the beginning. The forest had more secrets to reveal, and the worst was yet to come. Escalation, contact, and chaos. By the fourth night, the checkpoint felt less like a post and more like a trap. The soldiers' nerves were frayed, their routines now a thin shield against the mounting sense of dread. Every hour brought new anomalies, missing chem lights, strange patterns of knocks, and the ever-present choking stench that seemed to seep into their gear and skin. The logbook, once a record of mundane details, had become a catalog of the bizarre. Each entry was a confession. It knows we are here. The forest was no longer just a backdrop. It was an active participant, pressing in on all sides, swallowing sound and light. The soldiers rotated through their shifts, but sleep was a memory. Diaz, once the group's anchor, now flinched at every snap of a branch. Waller's hands shook as he adjusted his thermal scope, and Doc Singh's prayers grew louder, desperate. Even Staff Sergeant Kane, the unbreakable, had a new edge to his voice, a tightness that said he was running out of explanations. The night of the first direct contact began like any other, cold, silent, and tense. The team was split between the road and the timber stack, eyes scanning the tree line, radios hissing with static. The wind carried the familiar scent, wet fur and copper, thick enough to taste. The forest was too quiet, the kind of silence that made your ears ring. Then, movement. Diaz stiffened, his head snapping toward the trees. Movement, he whispered, voice sharp. The narrator lifted his NVGs, scanning the darkness. At first, nothing, just the endless green of pine and shadow. Then, between two trunks, a shape moved. Massive, slow, deliberate. Not a deer, not a bear. Something else. Thermal, confirmed, the narrator ordered. But Waller was already on it. Negative, he whispered, panic creeping in. No heat, nothing. Diaz's voice was a hiss. I saw it. Don't tell me it's not there. The smell intensified, curling into their nostrils, making stomachs twist. Branches snapped, closer this time, heavy and purposeful. Kane's voice crackled in their ears. Bravo, report. The narrator keyed the mic, trying to keep his voice steady. Unidentified movement inside 100 meters. Negative thermal, strong odor. Request guidance. The radio hissed, then went dead. Say again, he tried, but there was only static. Diaz muttered, "It's jamming us." No one argued. Then the knocks. Two, slow and deliberate, wood on wood, echoing off the ridge. Diaz raised his rifle. "I'm done waiting." "Hold," the narrator snapped. "No positive ID." Diaz lowered his weapon, but his hands shook. Another knock, louder, closer. Then from behind, a second set of knocks answered. The team spun, rifles up, but there was nothing. Just the creek running under ice, mist curling above it. The knocks bounced back and forth, two sources talking to each other in a language older than words. "That's impossible," Waller muttered. "Eyes out," the narrator said, voice cracking. The forest went silent again, the kind of silence that feels like a held breath. Then Diaz hissed, "Contact, left flank." The narrator turned just as something broke from the tree line, a blur, massive and low, moving with impossible speed. It closed half the distance before anyone could react. Diaz fired, 3 sharp bursts lighting up the night, muzzle flashes strobing the trees. The rounds tore through the air, but the shape veered, faster than anything that size should move. It vanished behind the timber stack, a wall of hair and muscle, a shoulder broad enough to block the stars. The stack shuddered, logs clattering. One rolled loose, slamming into the snow at the narrator's boots. Diaz kept firing, panic bursts, brass casings scattering. "Cease! Cease!" the narrator shouted, dragging Diaz's barrel down. The smell was everywhere now, musky and metallic, choking. They held position, rifles tracking, but nothing came out. The timber stack was still, the woods dead silent. Doc Singh's breathing rasped through his mask. "You hit it." Diaz shook his head, eyes wild. It moved like it knew where the rounds were going. Waller crouched, thermal sweeping the pile. "Still negative, I don't get it." The narrator forced himself forward, rifle raised. Every step heavy. He swept NVGs across the logs. Nothing, no shape, no heat, just broken bark where something had slammed hard enough to peel it away. Then a growl, not in front, but above. The narrator tilted his head back. On top of the timber stack, silhouetted against the stars, it crouched. Huge, covered in dark, matted hair, shoulders like boulders, arms longer than any man's. Its head was slightly conical, eyes reflecting a faint, unnatural shine. Those eyes locked on him, and his chest seized. His rifle felt like a toy. The creature let out a noise he would never forget. A deep, rolling rumble that wasn't just sound, but vibration in the ground, in his ribs, in his teeth. His knees wobbled. Then it leapt, not down at them, but away, clearing the stack and vanishing into the tree line in a single bound. Snow shook loose from the branches as it disappeared, like the forest exhaled with it. For a long moment, no one moved. Only Diaz whispered, "It's real. It's real." The narrator keyed the mic again. "Bravo, actual to command. We had contact. Large unknown entity breached our perimeter. Shots fired. No casualties. Negative confirmation of kill. Request immediate response." Static. Then, through the hiss, one word, same distorted voice as before. "Hold." The net went dead. They stood in silence, rifles up, eyes wide, hearts hammering. The night felt endless, and all the narrator could think was this. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't just passing through. It was testing them, measuring, waiting. And deep down, he knew it would be back. No one slept after that. Back at the TOK, Kane ripped Diaz for firing without a confirmed target. But his voice lacked its usual weight. Everyone had seen Diaz's face. He wasn't just spooked. He was broken open, stripped raw. Roar ordered the logbook laid out, studying every shaky entry. Odors, knocks, missing chem lights, the screams. He tapped the last line. "It knows we are here." Who wrote this? The narrator raised his hand. Roar looked at him too long before setting the pen down. "Speculation has no place in an official record." The narrator replied, "Speculation didn't knock down a timber stack and jump 30 feet into the trees." No one laughed. The lieutenant cleared his throat. From now on, body cams stay on at all times. Extra IR floodlights authorized. No more verbal logs. I want visual proof of every claim. Price, the Forest Service guy, had been leaning in the corner, sipping stale coffee. He set the cup down and said quietly, "Cameras won't help." Roar turned on him. "You have something useful to add?" Price looked at all of them before answering. "I've heard these stories my whole life. Old-timers say they move between the trees like water. One second you swear you see it, the next second nothing's there. Cameras don't catch water, only the ripple it leaves behind." Kane cut it off there. He told them to rack out, but nobody slept. Diaz lay on his cot, whispering prayers. Waller cleaned his thermal again and again. Doc Singh read from a pocket Bible under a red light. The narrator kept replaying the image of it crouched on the timber stack, those eyes locked on him. It wasn't just an animal. It knew what it was doing. It wanted them scared, and it had them. And as the wind howled outside, every man in that tent knew the forest wasn't finished with them yet, the search and the showdown. The night Diaz vanished, the checkpoint was a pressure cooker ready to blow. No one said it out loud, but every soldier felt it. The sense that the forest was closing in, that the rules had changed and they were now playing a game they didn't understand. The air was thick with dread, every breath laced with the memory of that impossible creature and the echo of knocks that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It happened fast. One moment, Diaz was at his post, eyes locked on the tree line, rifle steady. The next he was gone, vanished into the dark, swallowed by the woods without a sound. The only trace was a wide circle of trampled snow, no tracks leading in or out, as if the earth itself had spun around him and erased his presence. The radio crackled, and through the static came Diaz's voice, flat and calm. "Hold." But every man who heard it knew, deep in his bones, that it wasn't really Diaz speaking anymore. Panic threatened to break the team apart, but Kane's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. "Tomorrow night we go looking. No one else disappears." The plan was simple. 2 fire teams, full kit, NVGs, thermals, every magazine they could carry. Roar stayed behind with the radios, citing command protocol, but no one argued. The rest moved out at dusk, the forest swallowing them whole. The ridge felt tighter with every step. Trees leaned over the path like bars, the snow deeper than before, muffling their boots and making every movement feel slow and heavy. The only sounds were their own breathing and the occasional crack of ice in the creek. They reached the clearing where Diaz had vanished. The snow circle was still there, untouched by new fall, a perfect ring of absence. Singh whispered, "It's not natural." Kane raised a fist, signaling halt. "Perimeter, hold tight. Waller, thermal sweep." Waller scanned, breath loud in his mic. "Negative, just us." But the smell rolled in, thick and rotten, clinging to their gear and skin. Then the knock started, one to the left, another to the right, then behind them. 3 directions, circling. The team raised their rifles, barrels swinging back and forth, hearts slamming in their chests. Kane spoke into the mic, voice steady. "Bravo, actual, unknown contacts on all sides. Request immediate QRF." Static answered, then a voice, not roar, not command, but Diaz, layered with something guttural beneath. "Hold." Every man froze. Singh whispered, "That's not him." The forest erupted. A shape burst from the trees, massive and fast, slamming into Mahoney and hurling him 10 yards. His scream cut off as he hit a trunk. The team opened fire, a wall of gunfire lighting up the night, M4s barking, tracers stitching green lines into the dark. The creature barreled through it, bullets ripping fur and splinters flying, but it kept coming. 8 feet tall, shoulders broad as a door frame, eyes glowing faint in the NVGs. It moved like it was built of muscle and rage, swiping with one massive arm and knocking Waller clean off his feet. His helmet cracked against a rock, body limp. Kane stepped forward, M249 roaring, brass raining around his boots. The creature staggered, howled, a guttural roar that shook the trees. Another knock echoed, closer, then another. The narrator's stomach dropped. There wasn't just one. Shapes moved between the trees, tall and broad, shadows with eyes. They were surrounded. "Fall back!" Kane barked. "Back to the creek!" The team broke, firing in bursts to cover their movement. Snow sprayed, rounds cracking, the forest alive with roars and knocks. Mahoney crawled, blood streaking behind him. Singh dragged him up by the vest, hauling him with raw strength. The narrator kept firing, lungs burning, rifle hot in his hands. A shadow darted between trees, closer than it should have been. Too fast. He swung, fired, hit nothing but bark. At the creek, they formed a line. Water rushed under broken ice, mist curling into the air. They reloaded, hands shaking. Kane planted the saw on a log, eyes locked into the dark. The woods fell silent again, only their breath fogging the air. Then, from across the creek, they stepped into view. 3 of them, all massive, covered in thick, matted fur, shoulders hunched, arms nearly dragging, eyes reflecting pale light. They stood in a line, watching. Not rushing, not hiding, just standing like they owned the mountain. One stepped forward, taller than the rest, chest scarred, fur torn, skin showing pale under the moonlight. It opened its mouth, and the sound that came out wasn't just a growl, it was words, broken and wrong, layered with that deep rumble. "Hold." Every hair on the narrator's body stood up. His rifle nearly slipped from his hands. "They're speaking," Singh whispered, voice shaking. Kane didn't wait. He opened up with the saw, roaring, rounds tearing the night apart. The team joined in, rifles cracking, grenades launched. The tree line exploded in fire and smoke. For a moment, they thought they had them. One staggered, dropped to a knee, another reeled back, howling. But the leader kept coming, straight through it. Bullets tore into its chest, and it didn't stop. It waded the creek in 2 strides, water exploding around its legs. It hit Kane like a freight train, swatting the saw aside like a toy. Kane went down hard, weapons skidding into the snow. The narrator fired point blank, 3 round bursts into its side. It turned on him, eyes locking, and for a heartbeat, he thought that was it. Then something distracted it, a knock from deeper in the woods. The leader froze, head turning. The others froze too. And then, just like that, they pulled back, silent, vanishing into the tree line. Gone as fast as they had come. The team was left gasping, rifles trembling, wounded bleeding in the snow. Kane pushed himself up, coughing blood, eyes blazing. "They let us live." No one argued. They had been dead to rights. The creatures could have finished them, but they didn't. They were testing the soldiers, measuring their response, learning. As the adrenaline faded, the reality set in. Mahoney was barely conscious, Singh working to stabilize him. Waller was concussed, unable to stand. The rest were battered, shaken, and haunted by what they'd seen. The forest was silent again, but the sense of being watched never left. They pulled out at first light, wounded loaded into trucks, eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. The official report would call it a wildlife encounter, a training accident, a case of nerves. But every man who survived that night knew the truth. The forest was home to something ancient, something that could think, plan, and speak, something that had decided, for reasons they would never understand, to let them go. But as they left the ridge behind, the narrator couldn't shake the feeling that the test wasn't over. The creatures had shown their power, their intelligence, and their patience. And somewhere in the endless woods, they were still watching, still waiting, still learning. Aftermath and cover-up dawn broke over the mountains, cold and indifferent, as if nothing had happened in the night. But for the soldiers who staggered out of the woods, nothing would ever be the same. The forest, which had once seemed vast and empty, now felt like a living thing, one that had watched them, tested them, and let them go for reasons they could only guess at. The survivors moved like ghosts, their faces drawn and pale, eyes flicking to every shadow as if expecting the trees themselves to reach out and pull them back. The official response was swift and clinical. The platoon was pulled off the ridge before noon, the order coming down from command with no explanation. On paper, it was just a routine rotation, but everyone knew better. The medics met them at the trucks, their faces tight with concern, as they checked wounds and counted heads. Mahoney was loaded into an ambulance, his skull fractured, ribs broken, blood seeping through the bandages Singh had wrapped around his chest. Waller, concussed and barely able to stand, was led to the aid tent, his eyes unfocused, his words slurred. Singh never left Mahoney's side, his hands shaking as he clung to the stretcher, muttering prayers in a language the others didn't understand. Kane, battered but upright, moved through the chaos with a grim determination. He checked on every man, his voice low and steady, but the fire in his eyes was different now. Less the confidence of a leader, more the haunted look of someone who had seen too much. The narrator, hands trembling as he loaded gear into the back of a Humvee, felt the weight of every moment pressing down on him. The smell of wet fur and copper still clung to his jacket, impossible to wash away. No one spoke about Diaz. They didn't need to. His absence was a wound that wouldn't close, a question that no one wanted to answer. The way his voice had come through the radio, flat, wrong, layered with something inhuman, haunted every man who had heard it. The forest had taken him, and whatever had spoken in his voice afterward wasn't him anymore. Back at base, the cover-up began. Lieutenant Rohr filed his report with the efficiency of a man who knew exactly what was expected of him. Unconfirmed wildlife encounter, 1 missing soldier, presumed AWOL, 2 wounded in training accident. The words were clean, tidy, easy for headquarters to bury. There was no mention of the knocks, the voices, the impossible creatures that had moved through the trees like shadows. No mention of the way the forest had seemed to come alive, or the way the radio had carried a voice that didn't belong to any living man. The platoon scattered in the days that followed. Mahoney was sent home on medical leave, his injuries too severe for a quick return. Singh put in for early separation, telling anyone who would listen that he was done fighting enemies that didn't bleed. Waller transferred to a desk job, his hands still shaking whenever he tried to hold a rifle. Kane stayed, but he moved through the world like a man waiting for the next knock in the dark, his confidence replaced by a wary vigilance. The narrator finished his enlistment and walked away, hoping that distance would dull the memories. But the forest followed him. Some nights, he woke to the smell of wet fur and copper, so sharp it made him gag. He heard the knocks, deliberate and steady, echoing inside his walls. And sometimes when the static hum of a radio bled through an open frequency, he heard Diaz's voice whisper that same word, hold. It was a reminder that the story wasn't over, that the forest still remembered, and that whatever lived in those mountains was still out there, watching. The Army never put it in writing. The Forest Service wouldn't say it out loud, but the locals already knew. They avoided the ridges after dark, muttering about wood talk and warning outsiders not to answer any knocks they might hear. Price, the Forest Service liaison, stopped by the base one last time, his face drawn and tired. "You boys did what you could," he said quietly. "But some things out here don't want to be found. Best you let it be." The narrator tried to move on, but the memories clung to him like a second skin. He replayed every moment in his mind. The way the creature had crouched on the timber stack, the way its eyes had locked on his, the way it had spoken in a voice that was almost human. He remembered the fear, the helplessness, the sense that he was standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. And he remembered the feeling as they left the mountains behind, that they had been allowed to go, not because they had won, but because they didn't matter. The world moved on, as it always does. New units rotated in, new faces took up the watch at the checkpoint, and the official story became just another line in a file, buried and forgotten. But for those who had been there, the truth was impossible to forget. The forest had shown them a glimpse of something ancient, something that could think and plan and speak, something that had decided, for reasons they would never understand, to let them live. And somewhere in the endless woods, the creatures were still watching, still waiting, still learning. The knocks would come again, and the voices would echo through the static, and another group of soldiers would find themselves standing on the edge of the unknown, wondering if they would be allowed to leave. Because in the Appalachian night, the line between legend and reality is thinner than anyone wants to believe. And sometimes the only thing standing between you and the darkness is the hope that whatever is out there decides to let you go. Conclusion: the unanswered question. So what do you do with a story like this? How do you process the kind of experience that doesn't fit into any official report, that can't be explained away by training or science or the comfort of routine? For the men who survived those nights in the Appalachian woods, the answer is simple. You don't. You carry it with you, a weight that never really leaves. A question that never gets answered. And every time you hear a branch snap in the dark or catch a whiff of something whirled and metallic on the wind, you remember. The Army moved on, as it always does. New faces cycled through the checkpoints. New stories replaced the old. The official files were closed, the paperwork filed away, and the world kept turning. But for those who were there, the memory lingers. It's in the way they flinch at sudden noises, the way they scan the tree line when the sun goes down, the way they avoid talking about what really happened. Some of them left the service, unable to shake the feeling that something was still watching. Others stayed, but they carried a new kind of caution, a wariness that no amount of training could erase. The locals, of course, never needed convincing. They'd been telling stories about the mountains for generations, stories of things that move between the trees, of voices that call your name from the dark, of knocks that echo through the night with no source and no explanation. They call it wood talk, and they treat it with the kind of respect that only comes from hard experience. Don't answer, they say. Don't go looking. If you hear something you can't explain, let it be. It's advice born from centuries of living alongside the unknown, and it's advice the soldiers learned to take seriously. But the questions remain. What was it that watched them from the shadows? What intelligence lurked behind those eyes? What purpose drove it to test, to mimic, to let them go? Was it a creature, a spirit, something ancient that had always been there, or something new, learning and adapting as the world changed around it? Theories abound, cryptids, government experiments, echoes of old legends given flesh and bone. But the truth is, no one knows. And maybe that's the most terrifying part. Because the forest doesn't care about your explanations. It doesn't care about your rules, your weapons, your sense of safety. It exists on its own terms, ancient and indifferent. And sometimes it decides to remind you just how small you really are. The soldiers learned that lesson the hard way. They learned that there are places where the world is thin, where the old things still walk, and where the line between reality and nightmare blurs until you can't tell one from the other. And what about Diaz? His name never made the news. His disappearance chalked up to desertion or a tragic accident. But those who were there know better. They know that the forest took him, that something used his voice, that the last word he spoke wasn't his own. It's a reminder that the unknown isn't just out there. It can reach in, take what it wants, and leave you with nothing but questions. So if you ever find yourself on a lonely road in the Appalachians, if you ever hear a knock echo through the trees or a voice calling your name from the dark, remember this story. Remember the men who stood their ground, who faced something they couldn't understand, and who were allowed to leave, not because they won, but because they were spared. Don't answer the knock, don't follow the voice. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some questions better left unasked. Because in the end, the forest always keeps its secrets. It watches, it waits, and it remembers. And if you listen closely, you might just hear the echo of those knocks, the whisper of a voice that isn't quite your own, and the reminder that in the heart of the mountains, the unknown is never far away. So ask yourself, what would you do if you were there? Would you hold your ground or would you run? Would you trust your training or your instincts? Would you believe your own eyes or the stories whispered by those who came before you? The answer, like the forest itself, is something you'll have to find for yourself. But whatever you do, don't answer the knock. Because sometimes the scariest thing in the woods isn't what you see, it's what you can't explain. And in the Appalachian night, that's more than enough to keep you awake.